This is the IBM PS1 model 2011. I acquired this just days ago and it largely works. Except for this startup error here. And the floppy drive doesn't work either. But besides, what was the IBM PS1 2011 anyway? I love old computers. I love to collect them. I love to fix them. I'm the vintage collector and these are my stories. The IBM PS1 model 2011 is one kind of its own, positioned by IBM as an entry-level system appealing to the home user market. It begins with the special fact that the power supply lives inside the CRT screen. Yeah, you heard right, there are two cables leading from the CRT to the main unit. One is an ordinary VGA cable and the other is a bidirectional cable, not only carrying the voltage rails but apparently also the audio lines to the built-in speakers within the CRT. This was IBM's first PS1, introduced in 1990, and it was very much unlike the PS2 business workstations. Inside, it is recognizably PC compatible, built around a 10 MHz Intel 8286 and a 16-bit ISA 80 style architecture. Depending on the version, it came with either 512K or 1 MB of RAM, with the hard disk models adding a 30 MB fixed disk and a color display. But IBM wrapped the familiar core in a much more controlled design. Expansion was possible, but not in the usual rather open PC way, since the base machine had no normal internal ISA slots and relied on IBM-specific options like the external adapter card unit. The case itself can be opened without any tools. Just remove the front bezel and the outer cover slides right off. The only thing you really need to unmount, especially to access the CMOS battery, is the drive carrier. Although, as you'll see later on, for swapping the drives alone, even that is not required, since they sit on a slide-out mechanism. Now, it is as important to fix the battery first. Even though the PS1 does automatic device detection during post, you cannot change or persist new CMOS settings afterwards, which can cause problems later. Luckily, the CMOS battery hides inside the usual Dallas RTC chip. And even more surprisingly, it is socketed, only secured by this zip tie. Fixing the battery is rather easy. While you can totally do it with just a heat gun, I prefer to cut the top open using a Dremel. Then I heat it up so the outer shell becomes soft and can be torn away more easily. On the inside of the plastic shell there is this resin, and once heated this becomes brittle enough that you can cut it away in small chunks using just a knife. This is a relatively new trick I learned, but I must say it is way more elegant than just blindly drilling or dremeling into the chip. Eventually the battery is exposed and openly accessible for desoldering. Yeah, that made the startup error disappear. It also means I can now use the configure.exe and customize.exe commands to inspect or change the CMOS settings. Now it's time to look into the floppy drive. Of course, this machine would not be an IBM PS1 if it wasn't built around at least a few proprietary components. This fits into one of IBM's more controversial directions at the time, building PC-compatible systems that were still surrounded by IBM-specific parts, connectors and expansion paths. With the PS2 line, that strategy had already caused plenty of friction, and even on this home-oriented PS1 you can still feel the same design philosophy. And today, even more than back then, it makes repairing these machines or even upgrading them a real hassle. It starts with this proprietary memory module. Replacements, even higher capacity ones, are near impossible to get unless you shell out decent amounts of money. But it doesn't end here, but continues all the way down to the proprietary disk connectors. We have already seen this in my previous episode about the IBM P70, where I had to equip a standard PC-style floppy drive as a replacement. This requires a special adapter because the PS2 style floppy pinout delivers the 5V and 12V rails on pins 3 and 6 respectively. This open source adapter here does exactly that. And it also takes care of pin 4, which should be grounded for the PS1 and PS2 BIOS to properly detect the drive as a 1.44MB high density drive. There are also some tutorials out there like this one here. But breaking away pins from the drive connector? Nah, not really. Instead, I made my own cable. I cut wires 3 and 6 and also wire 4, which I connected directly to ground. The PS1 model 2011 luckily has this extension bracket with a standard burr connector, so I made a custom cable to deliver power to the drive separately. Of course, you could also use the wires from pins 3 and 6 and splice into a separate burr connector, but this setup is cleaner. Either way, this allows you to use standard PC floppy drives in a PS1 system. But before replacing anything, let's quickly look at the original floppy drive. Maybe there's still a way to rescue it. And yes, there is some corrosion here, barely visible, so this is probably the usual leaked capacitor problem. I could not save the same type of drive in the IBM P70, but I will give it another shot here. Just keep in mind the cluster of 3 capacitors on this part of the PCjr bipolar capacitors, while the pair over there are tantalums. As always, I don't have the correct SMD parts on hand, but radial capacitors also do the job. Not beautiful, but functional. And it works. Yes, it works again, so there's no need to swap the floppy drive, at least not for now. This machine was also missing one of the 4 feet on the underside of the chassis. 3D printing to the rescue, right? I took the time to redraw the original rubber foot so I could eventually print it in TPU, but right now I don't have the filament on hand. So I went with a PCjr printed foot instead, which took a few iterations to get the snapping mechanism right. With the final revision, it finally sits tight. No more wobbling around here. What really surprised me about this PS1 was the fact that the software was still largely in its original state. There were some custom programs installed, but I eventually removed all of them, leaving just the default system tutorial, MS-DOS 4 and the bundled Microsoft Works 2.0. Since this is still a DOS machine underneath, IBM bundled it with the 4-quad startup menu. It includes a built-in file browser, plus launchpads for the MS-DOS shell, the system tutorial and Microsoft Works. What is special about this machine in general is that it includes a ROM version of MS-DOS 4. It is very minimal and stripped down, but still good enough to boot the system even with a failed hard drive. And just recently, a program named IBM-Emulator has appeared, which is a system emulator specifically focused on the IBM PS1. So naturally, there is now a collection of ROM dumps and system backups, making it possible to experience the PS1 model 2011 in emulation, including many different language versions of the original bundled software. My machine was apparently sold into the Swiss-German market, and IBM seems to have taken a chance to create the custom ROM for it. Because, although it is almost identical to the German version, the config.sys and autoexec.bat on my machine set the Swiss-German keyboard instead of the default German keyboard. So even that little customization was justification enough to make ROM dump and system backup myself. and the latter is particularly important as the drive in this unit already exposes some bad sectors. Now, should that one die one day, it's going to be interesting as this is not a standard IDE drive, so replacing it would require additional efforts. My backups have not yet found their way into this collection, so for the time being I uploaded them to archive.org. Naturally, this entire procedure also helped me verify that the floppy drive was indeed working correctly after the repair. But one thing remains, and that is expandability. It's obvious that this machine does not have regular expansion slots. Its largest sibling, the Model 2121, had 2 internal ISO slots, but the Model 2011 only has these 2 expansion ports here. J7, the 34-pin connector, is intended for the audio and joystick option. J8 is for the ACU, the adapter card unit. That is an external expansion chassis which sits either on top of or below the IBM PS1 main unit. But without an ACU and the adapter kit on hand, one question remains. How do you network this thing?
And what about Linux?
Yeah, maybe next time. What remains for me to scout for now is an original system correct keyboard and also the matching PS2 mouse. What about you? Did you ever own an IBM PS1 or did you stay away from the infamous IBM personal systems and go with PC clones instead? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe or even become a channel member if you like retro explorations like these and want to support the channel. I'm the Vintage Collector and this